Chapter 35. Across Autobot-controlled territory, every spaceworthy ship was collected, inspected, and redeployed to a makeshift launch facility quickly constructed on the broad plain between Iakan and the polar ruin of 6 lasers over Cybertron. Aerial bots, the few seekers loyal to the Autobot cause, patrolled over the facility, but no Decepticons came closer than a single seeker that ghosted along the horizon for a moment until Jetfire rocketed out to challenge it. Then it was gone again, over the pole in the direction of the Hydrax plateau. You know Megatron won't let this go on forever. Alpha Trion counseled Optimus Prime the first time Optimus headed for the facility to see what the Autobots were going to have for the great fame that would cover their exodus to the stars. Optimus counted the ships and ran a mental tally against the number of Autobots he needed to evacuate. He didn't like the mismatch between the two numbers. It was great enough that he thought Megatron could not possibly be fooled. "I'm surprised he has let it go on this long," he said. "The other possibility to consider is that he hasn't let it," Alpha Trion said. "Perhaps he has problems of his own." "He'd have to have serious problems to not send over a flight of Seekers to strafe our launch facility," Optimus Prime said. "It's almost worth sending a little reconnaissance mission out to see what things are really like on the other side of the pole." "Wasted lives," Alpha Trion commented. Jazz, who was standing at Optimus Prime's other shoulder, said, "You need someone to go, I'll go." "No, I don't think so," Optimus Prime said. "Where we need some recon is up in lower space. I wouldn't be surprised if Megatron is watching us and waiting for a chance to wipe us out all at once." "What do we do if that's the case?" mused Alpha Trion. "Fight our way through," Jazz said. "There's no other way." Another flight of small ships, a motley collection of tankers and a single Energon ingot freighter, cruised in over the launch pad. "No," said Optimus Prime. "I don't think there is. At least we have to make Megatron think that way." What he was about to ask of the Autobots weighed heavily on his mind. "Are we ready?" Megatron asked. "There is one correct answer to that question." Shockwave waved him forward into the space that had until recently been the Dark Energon facility. Now it was a nerve center, an incredibly dense array of fibrous processing material woven around an imprisoned cluster of sparks that circulated in their invisible prison. "Yes," he said. Without a word, Megatron turned and left the lab. "Former lab," he corrected himself. Very well, he thought. Dark Energon was turning out to be a difficult resource to manage. It was harder and harder to enforce discipline among rank-and-file Decepticons when distribution of Dark Energon was controlled and clearly not egalitarian. So Megatron had separated his forces into units according to how much Dark Energon he anticipated having. Those he could afford to feed the Dark Energon would be his shock troops. Those he could not, they would have to scrap over the dwindling supplies of regular Energon like the lowly Autobots, or those doomed Cybertronians who had refused to take sides. The sudden cut-off of Dark Energon, and the destruction, apparently, of the geosynchronous Energon bridge, had prolonged the timeline Megatron had for the end of the war, but not fundamentally changed it. He still had the Triptychon project moving forward, and the Librarian was never going to be able to surmount the fundamental lack of Energon available on the surface. He did wish he knew what had happened to cut off the bridge, though. He would not have thought it possible that any Autobot could have gotten close enough to the core to interrupt the flow, given the intensity of Dark Energon between the rim of the Well of All Sparks and the interior levels where the core was said to reside. Something was different recently, he could tell that much. The Autobots were hunkered down deep in their territory, abandoning their forays into the contested areas of the planet for Energon and scavenged mechanical parts. At first Megatron had thought that this was because their Energon deprivation was starting to sap them of initiative and resolve, but then he noticed the large-scale movement of ships to their makeshift field north of Iakan. Then everything became clear. They were giving up and trying to get off the planet. They realized that they could fight against the Decepticons no longer. That was just fine, Megatron thought. In fact, that was just perfect. We will rendezvous at the space bridge, Optimus concluded. The space bridge? It doesn't work, Chaz protested. Alpha Trion stepped into the conversation before it degenerated into a useless back and forth. We don't know whether it works or not, he said. There's no indication in the Covenant or in any of the records that it is actually broken, or even explicitly non-functional. It has not been used in, well, TerraCycles. But I am older than that space bridge, and I still function. There was a ripple of nervous laughter at both the joke and the fact. Had they ever seen this before, wondered several of the Autobots in attendance? Had anyone ever seen Alpha Trion make a joke? None of them could remember. And anyway, it would only be funny if the space bridge worked. Jetfire came up with a small, nimble former asteroid scout ship, 8-track, to use as a mobile command post and flagship. Perfect, Optimus Prime said. He watched as Jetfire tried to pretend the praise didn't mean anything to him. Part of leadership, thought Optimus Prime, was realizing how important leaders could be and realizing that everything you did might be much more important to someone else than it was to you. Now let's roll out, he ordered, and the general order went out. Optimus Prime found to his surprise, and sorrow, that Alpha Trion had no intention of coming with the Autobots. How can you not? He asked. The Autobots would not have survived this long without you. There will be no extra room on the Ark. And perhaps you need to learn to survive without me, Alpha Trion said. Perhaps, Optimus Prime allowed. But there's no reason to rush the time when that becomes necessary, is there? Alpha Trion gestured around his study. I cannot leave this. My work here is not done. It can never be done. The core requires you to come back after the planet has had time to heal itself, correct? But it also warned me that everyone needed to get off planet for the duration of that healing, Optimus Prime said. The core and I. Alpha Trion thought for some time before going on. There is a relationship there. I do not believe that Cybertron will kill me after all the time I have spent inhabiting its surface. Megatron will. He'll have to find me. Vector Sigma is very well protected, Optimus. I do not think even Megatron will dare its defenses after what happened when he got too close to Teletron 1. Alpha Trion approached Optimus Prime and guided him to the study door. You have Autobots to rally and keep alive, he said. I need to finish outfitting your Ark and see what else might be worth saving before the Decepticons run out of Dark Energon and tear the planet apart. Will Vector Sigma be able to protect you? What Optimus Prime really wanted to ask was whether Vector Sigma existed at all. But if Alpha Trion believed in it, Optimus thought, he was ready to believe in it, too. It will. Now go. I have an Ark to prepare, and you have a fleet to manage. The evacuation of Yakin and the surrounding areas took much less time than Optimus Prime had anticipated. Part of the reason for this was that his Autobot subordinates managed the evacuation superbly, and part of the reason was that there were far fewer Autobots left than even the arch-pessimist Jetfire could have guessed. Is this all of them? He asked sadly. Can this be all? He turned to Optimus Prime. This is what you're risking to finish your Ark, and so is it worth it? It will be, Optimus Prime said simply. The flotilla of a few dozen ships carried all the Autobots. Optimus Prime didn't have the heart to quote the exact number to Jetfire. He looked up to the skies, still expecting an assault at any moment. But there was no sign of a real attack. Those satellite reports from the few remaining grid points to the east suggested that a large army of Decepticons was mobilizing to march on Yakin. Optimus Prime was glad he would not be there to see it when they sacked the city. The 8-track took off last of all the fleet. It was a nimble vessel, and performed even better than might have been expected under the sure hand of Jetfire. The fleet reached the lower reaches of Cybertronian space utterly without incident. Everyone have the location and bearing of the space bridge? Optimus Prime called out over the fleet frequency. "It looks much like the wrecked bridges, remember. Don't go by what you see. Trust the coordinates from the datanet and your instruments." Moving in a prolate spheroid cluster, the ragged fleet achieved space and the artificial gravity systems kicked in, on most of the ships, anyway. Some of them had not been tested for orbital use in teracycles, and although they all flew within their design parameters, a number of their secondary systems experienced failures. "Any sign of pursuit? All ships check in, report any Decepticon contact." One after another, every ship checked in. Some reported individual seeker flybys, but there were no engagements. "He knows he's won," Sideswipe said. "He's letting us go because we're quitting." The disgust in Sideswipe's voice was hard to handle. "It's not quitting, Sideswipe," Optimus Prime said. "We can't win if the planet is about to tear itself apart. We're getting out of the way so Cybertron can heal. That was never going to happen with the war going on." "It feels like we quit," Sideswipe insisted. Optimus Prime nodded. "I know it does. I know. But," he was thinking, if Megatron overcommitted his space-based resources, there were possibly enough Autobots to counterstrike and clear the skies for the Ark. And even if they didn't get out on this try, they had gained time to finish the Ark. These were dark times. The Ark was the only light Optimus Prime could see to lead them out. He couldn't tell Sideswipe this, though. Not every Autobot knew of the Ark, and of those who did, not every one of them approved. Jetfire and Prowl especially considered it a waste of resources better dedicated to fighting Decepticons. Ahead of them, the space bridge registered on their instrument panel. The other defunct bridges strung away from it in a loose chain around the equator of Cybertron. "So this is how we go back to the stars," Optimus Prime said. Jazz shrugged. "Anyway, it works, it works." Which came to seem ironic, given what happened next. Megatron was not done with them quite yet, and escape was never going to be that easy. Chapter 36. From Trypticon Station, a violet beam lanced out. Where it came into contact with the subsentient transport vessel, veins of dark energon curled across its exterior. There was a pause, a few nanoclicks during which witnesses on nearby ships thought that perhaps something in the weapon had gone wrong. Then the VK-991 disintegrated in a blast that overwhelmed the video arrays of every ship in the area, not to mention the optics of the unfortunate Transformers who happened to be watching through non-polarized windows. "What happened?" Sideswipe yelled. Jetfire rammed the 8-track into reverse, backing away from the main body of vessels headed for the space bridge. "Spread out!" he shouted into the comlink. "Spread out, circle the planet, approach the space bridge from the other side." "It won't work," Prowl said. He pointed at the chart of Cybertronian orbital space on the command terminal. "See? Trypticon's got a clear field of fire over any approach to the space bridge." Another violet beam pinned another transport, which blew apart just as fragments from the first explosion began to ping against the 8-track's hull. "I knew it," Jetfire said. "There's no way Megatron was going to let us go. Your Ark is a waste of time, Optimus. Time and energon and Autobot lives. Have you figured that out yet?" Then Megatron appeared on the screen of every grid-linked computer on Cybertron. "Autobots," he said. "The war is over. It is time for us to discuss the terms of your surrender." The frame expanded, revealing the vast army of Conian and Badland-bred gladiators and industrial bots turned soldiers. They stood behind Megatron, weapons bared and raised over their heads, keeping absolutely still and maintaining perfect silence. The combined show of power and discipline was terrifying. "You appear to think that you can simply leave this war when its progress is no longer to your liking," Megatron went on. "I am afraid that I, and Trypticon Station, cannot permit this. How will you teach future generations of Transformers the value of perseverance when you fling yourselves into space at the first sign of difficulty? The third Dark Energon-powered beam destroyed a third Autobot vessel. Megatron glanced off the frame and then went on. How many more vessels do you think Trypticon can pick off before you reach beyond its range? He asked. And where do you think its range ends? For all you know, it might be able to blast your ships to atoms all the way out to the space bridge. How does he know we're going to the space bridge? Jazz wondered. Maybe he doesn't, Optimus Prime said. Look at the way he's talking. He knows we're seeing this, but he doesn't know where we are. He looked at the rest of them on the command deck. It's Alpha Trion. He's baffling the feedback, but Megatron doesn't want us to know that. He doesn't know we're on this ship, Prowl said. And he's not on Trypticon Station. You, brother, Orion Pax, who now calls himself Optimus Prime, you lead your Autobots away. Who is? The one who does not believe in the individual now? Most of Cybertron wants the Decepticon way. They want my way, brother. Behind him, the army stayed frozen, but they said one word, powerfully and in unison. Megatron. Can you muster such an army, brother? If you can, meet me in Iachen. I will be there soon. And so will you. Unless you would rather join your comrades in a vacuum grave. Megatron offered a cruel smile as Trypticon Station destroyed a fourth ship, this one very close to the 8-track. We can't keep letting Trypticon have easy shots, Prowl said. Jetfire's hands were tight on the control yoke. The alternative is to let Megatron have them down on planet, he said. Optimus Prime nodded. Autobot ships, he said over the comlink on the command frequency. He trusted that Alpha Trion would also have secured that frequency, if he could do so much to interfere with the grid's feedback to Megatron's point of origin. Return to the surface immediately. Do not, repeat, do not, try to run the Trypticon blockade. Do not engage hostile Decepticon units on your way back to the surface. Return to your launch sites and await further instructions. The fleet, if it could be called that, heeled around and fell back into the gravity well of Cybertron, making its way down to the surface while avoiding the dangerous airspace of the Tigan-Hydraxcon area. In less than 100 cycles, all of the ships had made safe landings on the polar plain between Iachen and the ruins of 6 lasers over Cybertron. Except the 8-track, which skimmed along the asteroid belt, ducking in and out of the debris field to baffle Trypticon Station's detection arrays. They stayed there until they saw that Megatron was not making any immediate attack on the landed ships, or on Iachen. He just wants to keep us down there, Optimus Prime said. He knows that as long as we're on the surface, he can grind us down. The only way he loses is if we get to the space bridge, Prowl said. So that's objective number 1. It is to be. Then what we do is hit the station right now, before anyone knows we're coming, Jazz said. Optimus Prime was looking at a magnified image of the station. There would be no way past Trypticon Station for the Ark, either, for which he was risking this great feint. Every cycle they spent in space was another cycle during which Alpha Trion led the finishing work on the construction of the Ark, at great costs in Energon that fighting units badly needed. Here, he said, pointing at a blank expanse of the station's hull, on the far side from the windowed bridge area and the rotating radar fixtures. Blind spot, he said. Or if it isn't, I don't see the sensor that covers it. It was then that a personal communication for Optimus Prime appeared on the command terminal, on the frequency that he and Megatron had used for their initial clandestine communications, so long ago. Brother, he said. Optimus Prime toggled his response to audio only. Odd that you still call me that, Megatron. Your actions have been anything but brotherly. Family relationships are the most difficult, Megatron said smugly. Brother, you know you cannot win. When I said the time had come to discuss terms, I meant it. You have lost. All you need to decide now is how many of your Autobots you want to die. No, it is a question of how many Autobots would rather die than live in your Cybertron, Optimus Prime said. Brother. That's where you prove that you still don't understand what was at stake from the beginning. It was never about what any individual wanted, librarian. It was about making them feel like they were important. The guild masters and caste hierarchy did not do that. I did. That's why I have won. Now, do you want to fight on? I will kill the rest of you if I must. But that does not leave much for me to rule once you have yielded to me the 140. Matrix of Leadership. Optimus Prime did not say anything. How did Megatron know he had been granted the Matrix of Leadership? Everything I want to know about on Cybertron, I find out, Megatron said. That's what you're wondering, brother, isn't it? Optimus Prime gestured to Jetfire to push out of the asteroid belt toward the blind side of Tripticon Station. He moved off the bridge and toggled the communication to full video. For what he was about to say, he wanted Megatron to see his face. There are a great many things I wonder, brother, he said. One of them is how you came so far from when we first knew each other. You fought the castes, and now you kill your own soldiers with Dark Energon so they will fight a little harder for a little longer. They are your gladiators, Megatron. And somewhere, one of them sees you the way you once saw the High Council. A familiar expression of contempt replaced momentary confusion on Megatron's face as he mastered his initial reaction. The Decepticon who views me the way I once viewed the High Council? He said. He is already dead, though he doesn't know it yet. And you, perhaps, have lost the long war, though you can only see the first battles that you have won, Optimus Prime said, then cut the connection. He stood for a moment in the small alcove between the bridge, airlock, and cargo bay, regaining control over his emotions. Then he walked out onto the bridge and looked out ahead of the 8-track, where the blank space on Tripticon Station grew steadily to fill the ship's forward field of vision. We're ready? We're ready, Sideswipe said. Ready to go.
I'm glad you enjoyed that video/gameplay. Just remember to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below. Until next time, goodbye!